Picture this. A country is in a demographic emergency. Its fertility rate just hit 0.695, the lowest ever recorded for any nation in human history. Its population is shrinking. Its factories cannot find workers. Its hospitals cannot find caregivers. Its farms are running on empty. Its government spends years negotiating a labor deal with another country, signs it, celebrates it, and then one local election candidate puts up a billboard that undoes the goodwill of all of it. On that billboard, the flag of the country they desperately need workers from is a man wearing a turban, crossed out with a giant prohibition symbol. The message, ban them, keep them out. We do not want them here. The country doing this is Taiwan. The country being targeted is India. And the most important part of this story, the part that almost nobody is saying out loud, is this. Taiwan needs India far more than India needs Taiwan. And every single day that passes, that gap is getting wider. Today, this channel is going to break down the full story, the billboard, the politician, the demographic collapse that Taiwan is desperately trying to hide, the geopolitical damage of what is happening, and exactly what India should or should not do about it. Because here's the truth. India is not angry about this. India is observing, and India is simply taking notes. There is a number behind all of this, a single statistic that explains everything. We will get to it later in the video, and when we do, it will change how you see this entire story. Let us start with the facts. In May 2026, images began circulating online of a political billboard in southern Taiwan. The billboard belongs to a ward chief named Lee Hung-yi. He is running as an independent candidate in the city council election scheduled for later in 2026. He placed this advertisement on a public street as part of his election campaign. Now, what was on the billboard? A crossed-out illustration of a brown-skinned man wearing a turban and a beard. Alongside it, what appeared to be an upside-down Indian flag. The visual messaging was clear to anyone who saw it. Indians are not welcome here. The reaction was immediate and global. Indians living in Taiwan described the billboard as disturbing, as making them feel targeted, as openly racist in a way they had not seen in such a public, official format before. One Indian origin resident posted on social media, "I can respect that everyone has different views on migrant worker policy. You don't want Taiwan to open up to migrant workers. That is your political stance. But expressing it in this way really doesn't seem right. That is one of the most restrained, measured responses to an overtly racist political advertisement that one could imagine. And it only underlines how professional and grounded the Indian community in Taiwan has remained throughout this. This billboard showed a turbaned man. The Sikh community, whose image was so callously used on that billboard, has given humanity some of the most extraordinary soldiers, farmers, business people, engineers, and community builders that any civilization has produced. The turban is not a symbol to put a cross through. It is a symbol of honor, courage, and dignity that has stood for centuries. That is not opposition to a policy. That is the dehumanization of a people. And Taiwan's own political leaders said exactly that. Even Joseph Wu, Taiwan's National Security Council Secretary General, one of the most senior figures in Taiwan's government, went on record condemning the billboard. He wrote publicly, "I feel ashamed to see a local politician doing this for attention. I condemn such despicable conduct in a very welcoming society. I will continue to work hard to strengthen Taiwan and India mutual cooperation." So let us be precise about what happened. One independent candidate in one district in one city put up a racist billboard. Taiwan's government condemned it. Taiwan's ruling party condemned it. Taiwan's senior national security officials condemned it. The problem is not that Taiwan is anti-India. The problem is that this was allowed to happen in public, that a politician calculated this would win him votes, and that this is not the first time this kind of thing has happened in Taiwan. So what did Lee Hung-yi say when he was challenged over the remarks? In an interview with Taiwan's central news agency, He insisted that his opposition was not directed at migrant workers as a whole. Instead, he said his concerns were specifically about Taiwan's proposed plan to bring in workers from India. According to him, Taiwan currently lacks the administrative systems and support infrastructure needed to manage such an expansion effectively. But this story did not start in May 2026. It started much earlier. And what happened before is even more shocking. Let's back to February 2024. On February 16th, 2024, Taiwan and India signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Labor Cooperation. The agreement was designed to address Taiwan's worsening labor shortage by creating a formal pathway for Indian workers to come to Taiwan. This was presented as a bilateral win. India has a young, skilled, and large workforce. Taiwan has factories that cannot fill positions, elderly care homes with staff shortages, and agricultural fields going unworked. The math was obvious. And then in February 2024, Taiwan's labor minister, Xu Mingchun, gave an interview. She was asked about the recruitment plan. Which workers would Taiwan hire from India? How would they be selected? Her answer caused a global controversy. She said Taiwan would first recruit workers from India's northeastern states because, and this is a direct quote, their skin color and eating habits are similar to ours. Furthermore, most of them believe in Christianity. She also added that they were skilled in manufacturing, construction, and agriculture. But the qualifications almost did not matter, because the first criteria she mentioned, the ones that were supposed to make these workers acceptable, were skin color and religion, not skill level, not language ability, not professional qualifications. It was skin color, religion, eating habits in 2024. From a cabinet minister of a country that presents itself to the world as a modern, democratic, values-driven society. The backlash was immediate and came from inside Taiwan as well as outside. A member of the ruling party publicly condemned the remarks, writing that Taiwan's recruitment of migrant workers absolutely cannot be based on race or ethnicity, period. By March 4th, Taiwan's foreign ministry had issued a formal apology, describing the government's narratives as not entirely appropriate. By March 5th, the Labor Ministry issued its own apology, saying Xu had not intended to discriminate and that her choice of words was inaccurate. By March 6th, Xu Mingchun personally apologized in a legislative hearing, saying Taiwan's labor policies are crafted with equality in mind and are never discriminating. 3 separate apologies from 3 different levels of the Taiwanese government. And India's Ministry of External Affairs, silent, completely silent. India did not react, did not issue a statement, did not recall any officials, did not demand explanations, because India understood something that commentators screaming about this online did not. India is the largest democracy on earth, 1.4 billion people, the fastest growing major economy in the world, a civilization thousands of years old that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to diminish it. When you are that, you do not need to raise your voice. Your size speaks for itself. Your trajectory speaks for itself. Your silence speaks for itself. To understand why Taiwan's politicians are doing what they are doing, to understand why a country that desperately needs Indian workers is simultaneously allowing politicians to campaign against Indian workers, one needs to understand what is happening to Taiwan's population, because the numbers are not just alarming, they are historically unprecedented. In 2025, Taiwan's total fertility rate hit 0.695. That is not just the lowest in Taiwan history. That is the lowest total fertility rate ever recorded for any country anywhere in the world. A fertility rate of 2.1 is the replacement level, the minimum needed for a population to sustain itself without immigration. Taiwan is at 0.695, roughly 1/3 of replacement. In 2025, Taiwan recorded 107,812 births and more than 200,000 deaths. More than twice as many deaths as births. This is the second consecutive year of overall population decline. Taiwan has officially entered what demographers classify as a super-aged society, meaning 20% or more of the population is age 65 or older. Taiwan hit this threshold in 2025. South Korea, Japan, and Germany took decades to reach super-age status. Taiwan got there in 7 years, the fastest aging recorded in modern demographic history. Taiwan's National Development Council projects a deficit of 400,000 workers by 2030. Today, there are already more than 1.12 million unfilled job vacancies across the island. As of early 2026, Taiwan has approximately 873,000 migrant workers, mostly from Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Thailand. These four countries supply virtually all of Taiwan's foreign labor. Taiwan relies on fewer migrant-source countries than Japan, South Korea, or Singapore. Labor ministry officials have described this as a potential labor shortage national security crisis. Their words: if even one of those four countries temporarily halted labor exports due to politics or policy shifts, Taiwan's manufacturing and care systems would be immediately compromised. This is the context in which Taiwan signed the MOU with India in February 2024. This is the context in which the first batch of Indian workers, around 1,000 in the manufacturing sector, is now expected to arrive by end of 2026. Taiwan's government knows this. Taiwan's industries know this. Taiwan's hospitals, farms, and factories know this. And yet, a politician puts up a billboard banning Indians. Now here's the deeper question that this raises. With only 3,500 to 4,000 Indians currently working in Taiwan, a tiny fraction compared to Vietnamese and Indonesian workers who number in the hundreds of thousands, why is a politician building an entire campaign around banning Indians specifically? The answer has almost nothing to do with Indians and everything to do with Taiwan's internal politics. Here is what Taiwan's own geopolitical experts are saying. And this is important because it reframes the entire story. The anti-Indian sentiment in Taiwan is not organic. It is not a natural reflection of how most Taiwanese people feel about India or Indians. It is, at least in significant part, manufactured. When the 2023 protest against Indian migrant workers took place, Taiwan's government investigated where the online momentum for this protest originated. Their conclusion: the social media accounts that spread fear about Indian workers and built momentum for the protest were traced to Chinese-linked sources. Think about that for a moment. China, running a disinformation campaign on Taiwanese social media to turn Taiwanese people against Indian workers, before Indian workers had even arrived. Why would China care about Indian migrant workers in Taiwan? Because India and Taiwan getting closer, economically, technologically, and demographically, is a nightmare for Beijing. India-Taiwan semiconductor cooperation is already well advanced. The Tata PSMC deal, which will bring Taiwan's chip manufacturing knowledge to India's Dholera fab in Gujarat, is a landmark agreement. Foxconn has been massively expanding its India operations. The ASML partnership that India secured recently is the kind of technological alignment that China has been desperately trying to achieve and been blocked from. A India-Taiwan labor partnership that brings Indian workers to Taiwan, workers who will build relationships, understand each other's societies, and create people-to-people bonds, is one more thread connecting two democracies that Beijing wants kept apart. And so Beijing does what Beijing does. It finds the fracture points, it amplifies them, it manufactures fear, it turns ordinary Taiwanese people into unwitting soldiers in a geopolitical campaign they do not even know they are part of. The closeness between India and Taiwan is not in the interest of the Chinese leadership. One of the tools that China has been using is the disinformation campaign. The protest started with a few online accounts, and according to Taiwan's government, the source of these accounts was from the Chinese side. Some people got influenced by this. But this is not a majority view in Taiwan, and that distinction matters enormously. The majority of Taiwan's political establishment, its senior officials, its geopolitical analysts, and its business community understands that India is a critical partner. The billboard is not Taiwan. The racist minister's comments were not Taiwan. They are noise, amplified by China. That does not reflect the actual direction of Taiwan's strategic thinking. But noise has consequences, and India is watching. Let us spend a few minutes actually looking at Taiwan's own situation. Not to mock Taiwan, not to wish them harm, but because understanding what Taiwan is dealing with makes the anti-India racism even more baffling and self-destructive. What drives such extreme fertility decline in Taiwan? Taiwan's own researchers have identified the causes. Housing costs have become unaffordable for young people, particularly in Taipei. Working hours are among the longest in Asia. Career penalties for mothers are severe. Marriage is declining. Just over 104,000 marriages were registered in all of 2025, the lowest ever recorded. The average age of first marriage is now 33.1 for men and 31.1 for women. The government has tried. Cash incentives of up to 100,000 new Taiwan dollar per child have been offered. Child care subsidies have expanded. None of it is working. Demographers say financial incentives alone cannot reverse a decline driven by deep structural and cultural factors. Taiwan's population peaked at 23.6 million in 2019. By end of 2025, it had fallen to 23.3 million. By 2065, the projection is that Taiwan's population will be roughly half of what it is today. One worker supporting one elderly person. That is where Taiwan is headed. And it is not just births. Taiwan faces structural labor exploitation in its migrant worker sector that it has not adequately addressed. The system of broker fees, in which migrant workers pay enormous sums to private employment agencies simply for the privilege of working in Taiwan, is widely documented as predatory. Vietnamese and Indonesian workers have frequently ended up in debt bondage because of this system. Taiwan's KMT opposition, the same party whose members have been most loudly opposing Indian workers, has been raising concerns about absconding migrant workers and crime. But the irony is profound. The reason migrant workers abscond from employers in Taiwan is frequently because the employer-tied visa system leaves workers trapped in exploitative conditions with no legal remedy except to run. So when Taiwanese politicians campaign against Indian workers using fears about safety and management, they are pointing at India while standing in a glass house of their own making. Here is one more number. Currently, only 3,500 to 4,000 Indians work in Taiwan. For comparison, there are approximately 250,000 Vietnamese workers and more than 320,000 Indonesian workers in Taiwan at any given time. An election candidate in Kaohsiung built an entire campaign around banning a community of 3,500 to 4,000 people. In a country that has 873,000 foreign workers and is desperately trying to recruit more. The irrationality of this would be funny if it were not so offensive. Now, the most important question, not what happened, but what did India do about it? And here is something that might surprise some viewers. India did not escalate. India did not boycott Taiwan. India did not make angry statements or demand public apologies on behalf of 1.4 billion people. India also did not attempt to inflame public anger against the country. Instead, New Delhi responded with restraint and quiet confidence, signaling that India did not see the need to react emotionally to every external provocation. Because that is how powerful giants work. Real power does not feel the need to react emotionally to every provocation or criticism. Real power observes carefully, understands the intent behind every action, and remembers who said what and when. But most importantly, real power does not get distracted from its larger goals. It continues building. It continues growing stronger economically, strategically, technologically, and diplomatically. It focuses on long-term progress instead of short-term outrage. India's Ministry of External Affairs was completely silent on these comments. Taiwan issued 3 apologies in 3 days. And India never really had to say a word. That is leverage. Quiet, confident, and devastating leverage. But there are things India should do, and some of them are already being done. First, India must make sure that any labor agreement with Taiwan is built around the protection of Indian workers, not just the movement of manpower. If Indian workers are going to help fill Taiwan's labor shortages, then the arrangement must be fair, transparent, and enforceable from day one. Indians should get involved in direct hiring arrangements wherever possible, so that they are not trapped by exploitative broker networks that charge illegal fees, create debt burdens, or mislead people about the jobs they are taking. If intermediaries are involved, they must be licensed, monitored, and held accountable. Wages must also be guaranteed. Indian workers should not be treated as a cheap substitute labor force. They should receive fair pay, equal treatment, safe workplaces, and access to basic dignity. Most importantly, there must be a clear complaint and recourse system. If a worker is cheated, underpaid, abused, or abandoned, they should know exactly where to go, whom to contact, and how quickly help will arrive. The deal should not simply be good for Taiwan's economy. It must also be good for Indian workers and their families. The current plan includes a 5% direct hire target, meaning at least 5% of Indian workers would be hired directly by employers rather than through agencies. India should push that number higher. India has seen what happens to migrant workers in other countries when protections are inadequate. It should not replicate those failures. Second, continue building the semiconductor and technology partnership with Taiwan on India's terms. The Tata PSMC deal, the ASML partnership, these are the strategic plays that matter. These are the deals that shift the power dynamic permanently, not angry social media posts. Chip factories. Third, India should track the narrative. The Chinese disinformation campaign that inflamed anti-Indian sentiment in Taiwan is a template China has used elsewhere and will use again. India's intelligence and foreign policy community needs to understand this playbook because it is not just being run in Taiwan. It is being run in Bangladesh, Nepal, parts of Southeast Asia, and in Western social media against the Indian diaspora. Fourth, India should give Taiwan a clear and simple signal. The pace and scale of the people-to-people partnership that we build with you depends on how you treat our people. Not through threats, through the natural consequence of countries choosing their friends. Taiwan's senior leadership has already condemned the billboard. Taiwan's security apparatus has already identified China's role in manufacturing anti-Indian sentiment. The space for a productive partnership exists, but that partnership will be built on terms of dignity, or it will not be built at all. Let us hold up the mirror. India does not need China or Taiwan's permission to exist. India does not need a war chief's validation to matter in the world. India does not need to ask anyone whether a turbaned Indian man is acceptable. The irony that the candidate who put up that billboard represents a city that contains one of Taiwan's largest manufacturing clusters that depend on global supply chains that increasingly run through India, would be deeply poetic if it were not so sad. Countries that are shrinking, countries where more people die each year than are born, countries where the workforce is hollowing out as the elderly population expands. These countries are not in a position to pick and choose which workers they will deign to accept. Reality does not negotiate. And India, a country adding more working-age people to its workforce every year than most countries have in their total population, is not waiting for anyone's approval. Taiwan is not alone in this problem. Analysts who study anti-Indian sentiment globally have noted a pattern across East Asia. In South Korea, documented cases of discrimination against Indian workers have surfaced repeatedly. In parts of Japan, similar patterns exist. The region, economically advanced, demographically declining, culturally homogeneous, has developed a form of economic anxiety that sometimes expresses itself as ethnic bias toward incoming labor. The economic logic underneath it is understandable, even if the expression is not. These countries built extraordinary industrial wealth in the post-war era. They developed a strong sense of national identity tied to that success. And now they face a future in which that success can only be sustained with large numbers of people who look different, speak different languages, and come from very different cultural traditions. That adjustment is difficult. The human tendency to resist change, especially change that feels culturally threatening, is real. But there is a difference between understanding a tendency and accepting its expression. Calling a turban-wearing man a symbol to be crossed out on a public billboard is not a cultural adjustment difficulty. It is racism. Saying Indian workers are acceptable only if they have similar skin color is not immigration caution. It is racism. And the appropriate response from India is not rage. It is confidence. It is the quiet power of a country that knows it is going to shape the 21st century and is not going to be derailed by a ward chief or a minister who could not find her words. India needs a strong approach for anti-India racism globally, not just in Taiwan, not just in East Asia, everywhere, online and offline. Document it, name it, trace where it comes from, because increasingly, as in the Taiwan case, it has Chinese fingerprints. This is not a video about India being victimized. India is not a victim here. This is a story about Taiwan that is making a terrible strategic error, that is allowing its internal politics and externally manufactured fears to poison a relationship it cannot afford to lose. India watches, India builds, India grows, and the day will come, it is already coming, when the conversation is not about whether Taiwan wants Indian workers. It will be about whether India is willing to send them. That is where the power lies. That is where the future points. Before this video ends, there is something that needs to be said. It is about every single person watching this right now. This channel exists because of people who show up, people who watch till the end, people who share these videos with who they think deserve to understand the world a little more clearly, people who engage with us because they genuinely have something to say, people who have been here from the early days, quietly watching, quietly supporting, quietly becoming part of something that started small and is becoming something much bigger. To everyone who watches our videos, thank you. You are the reason the next video gets made. To everyone who has ever shared something from this channel with someone who needed to hear it, thank you. To everyone who supports this channel regularly, you are not just a viewer, you are part of this. Every single one of you. So thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a 30-minute video about geopolitics when you could have been doing literally anything else. That choice says something about you. Keep watching, keep sharing, keep asking hard questions, and we will keep showing up with the answers. See you in the next one.